In 1892, a Jewish immigrant from London did something that made John D. Rockefeller's oil monopoly irrelevant. He did it without a single oil field or refinery. He did it with a ship. Marcus Samuel built what became Royal Dutch Shell, a company generating over $300 billion in annual revenue today. Yet decades after his death, the company he founded collaborated with Nazi Germany and used forced laborers in its refineries. That contradiction between the immigrant who built one of history's great industrial enterprises and the corporation that became complicit in wartime atrocities runs through the entire Shell story. To understand how this happened, it is necessary to understand what the oil industry looked like in the late 1800s. Oil had become the hidden engine of global power. It fueled industries, lit streets, and pushed ships across oceans. Navies measured their strength by access to it. Nations quietly assessed each other's power through it. Whoever controlled oil controlled the fate of entire economies. Most people assume that oil empires were built by drilling, by finding land, digging deep, and refining crude. But the real choke point was transport. Moving oil from one place to another was where the genuine challenge lay. Shipping oil overseas was expensive. Transport alone consumed nearly a third of the final price. Real power sat with whoever could move oil cheaper than everyone else. Marcus Samuel saw that gap. He became one of the first true pioneers of global oil shipping, beat competitors on cost by rethinking transport, and helped push bulk oil tankers into everyday use. In the process, he created the backbone of the modern oil shipping industry. Within a few years, by 1897, he controlled more than 15 tankers and was moving 70% of the world's seaborne petroleum trade. Samuel came from an Iraqi Jewish immigrant family. Far from wealth or influence, his early life was shaped by necessity and ambition rather than privilege. He took over his father's import-export business, a modest operation that handled a wide range of goods, including oriental seashells. That detail would eventually inspire the name of his famous company. Samuel's vision extended beyond the family trade. He began exploring new opportunities, one of which was handling consignments of kerosene. At the time, shipping oil was cumbersome and costly. Crude oil was packed into individual wooden barrels. Filling them took time. They often leaked. The barrels themselves were expensive to produce. Railroads had their own complications. Refiners produced small, inconsistent quantities, so trains had to stop at multiple locations to fill a single load. All of this drove up costs and therefore prices. Samuel understood the real bottleneck. Moving oil efficiently was where the advantage lay. Cracking transport costs would give him an edge that drilling alone never could. He also understood that Rockefeller's Standard Oil could crush any competitor who tried to challenge it directly. For Samuel, the key was reaching many markets simultaneously. By spreading efforts broadly and moving smarter, he found a way to scale while staying out of Standard Oil's direct path. To make this happen, he turned to innovation. He commissioned the design and construction of bulk kerosene tankers, ships unlike anything the world had seen before. These vessels carried oil by the ton rather than in small, leaking 5-gallon barrels. Moving oil in large quantities reduced the cost per unit and made every shipment more efficient and profitable. This was economies of scale applied to a problem that no one had solved at that scale before. The impact was immediate. Bulk transport cut packaging costs and increased volume. Samuel could underprice rivals and capture markets that had previously seemed out of reach. Then a far bigger opportunity appeared. The Suez Canal had opened in 1869, cutting 4,000 miles from the route to India and the Far East. For other shippers, including Standard Oil, the canal was effectively off-limits. Canal authorities worried about the risk of flammable cargoes such as kerosene. Thus Samuel saw a chance that no one else had identified. He leveraged his connections with the Rothschilds, who had funded Britain's original purchase of canal shares, to secure access. By 1891, he had secured a 9-year supply contract to sell kerosene to markets east of the Suez. Even so, the logistics had to be flawless. One failure at sea, a single fire or leak, and the canal would close its doors to oil tankers permanently. Samuel knew this. The system had to prove itself before it could scale. He commissioned the Murex, a tanker built to standards no authority could ignore. Every safety feature was deliberate. Lloyd's of London awarded it the top safety rating. which convinced the Canal authorities to grant passage. In July 1892, the Murex passed through the Suez Canal, carrying 4,000 tons of Russian kerosene. While weeks were cut from the journey to Asia, costs dropped sharply compared to the route around Africa. Standard Oil was still shipping in barrels. Samuel's bulk tanker system gave Shell a structural advantage that Rockefeller could not quickly replicate. To stand out in the kerosene market, the Samuels created the Shell brand and painted their cans bright red. That small decision had outsized consequences, turning packaging into a signal of reliability and scale. By 1896, the kerosene trade alone was earning more than all other family businesses combined. A year later, Marcus and his brothers incorporated the Shell Transport and Trading Company and launched their first refinery at Balikpapan in Dutch Borneo. When Shell began pushing into global markets, Standard Oil responded as expected. Prices were slashed wherever Shell appeared. It was aggressive, ruthless, and the kind of monopoly play Rockefeller was famous for. Vertical integration, railway deals, and relentless consolidation had allowed Standard Oil to control a dominant portion of all oil produced in the United States. But overseas, Samuel had a structural advantage that price cuts alone could not eliminate. Standard Oil could reduce prices, but it could not match Shell's transport economics. Bulk tankers, shorter routes, and lower costs meant that Shell could survive on margins that would have destroyed other competitors. The price wars hurt Shell but did not destroy it. That endurance created opportunity, and that opportunity arrived in 1901. The Spindletop oil field in Texas came into production with extraordinary force. In its first year, output crossed 3.5 million barrels. By the second year, it surged past 17 million. Prices collapsed. Rockefeller's grip briefly loosened, and for the first time, the monopoly looked vulnerable. Samuel moved quickly to lock in supply contracts and push Shell into the U.S. market, but Texas overproduced itself into scarcity. Supplies dried up nearly as fast as they had appeared. Half of Shell's fleet sat idle. Meanwhile, Standard Oil retained control of refining, pipelines, and capital. Shell had proven it could survive and even challenge, but survival and victory were not the same. By 1902, Samuel's attention was divided. He was serving as Lord Mayor of London. 9 months passed without him setting foot in Shell's offices. When he returned, the company was in serious crisis. The solution came in 1907 when Samuel merged Shell with Royal Dutch. Even before the merger, Shell's debt outweighed its assets by a ratio of 2-to-1. A year after the merger, the company was debt-free and paying a 20% dividend. The fit worked because each side supplied what the other lacked. Royal Dutch brought marketing and transport expertise. Shell brought ships. Combined, they were capable of competing with Standard Oil, which still controlled roughly 80% of the global petroleum market. Ownership was split 60-40, with Royal Dutch holding the majority and Shell Transport and Trading keeping the rest under British law. Royal Dutch took over the underperforming production and refining operations, giving the combined company a chance to improve its operations. Shell's directors remained on board, preserving continuity, but they ceded control. The bigger benefit was managerial competence. Shell had been under-equipped to run the company effectively. Royal Dutch supplied the expertise it needed. World War I then transformed petroleum into a strategic weapon, and Royal Dutch Shell was positioned to supply fuel to the war effort in substantial volumes. That period changed how governments and markets perceived oil companies. Around the same time, Standard Oil was collapsing under its own weight. Political backlash and lawsuits had caught up with it, and the U.S. Supreme Court ordered the company dissolved under the Sherman Antitrust Act. While Standard's successor companies reorganized domestically, Shell was expanding globally. The company developed new oil fields in Venezuela and Mexico, securing long-term supply and stabilized cash flow. When Marcus Samuel retired in 1920, shareholders credited him with Shell's rise after the war. He had taken a London trading firm and built a global industrial empire. He was later elevated to the Viscountcy of Bearsted, a title reserved for men regarded as pillars of the British establishment. Samuel had refused to fight Rockefeller on Rockefeller's terms. Rather than chasing oil fields, he focused on transport, costs, and logistics. By mastering those hidden levers, He gained an edge that nobody had anticipated, but the corporate machine he built carried consequences that Samuel did not live to see. In the 1930s and 1940s, parts of Royal Dutch Shell became deeply involved with Nazi Germany. During the Second World War, forced laborers worked inside oil refineries and petrochemical plants owned and operated by the Royal Dutch Shell Group. Most came from Eastern Europe and the Netherlands, civilians taken from their homes and relocated under coercion. These workers were sent to facilities run by Shell's German and Austrian subsidiaries, Renania and Shell Austria. At those sites, long shifts, tight surveillance, and SS guards defined daily life. Barracks were cramped and filthy. Food was severely rationed. Workers received no wages, no protection, and no relief. Shell also helped establish Deutsche Gasoline, a company created to give the Third Reich tighter control over fuel supplies for both civilian and military use. Shell shared control of that entity with IG Farben, the same company that produced Zyklon B, the gas used in Nazi concentration camps. The company that Marcus Samuel founded, a man from an Iraqi Jewish immigrant family who built his empire on the margins of a market that tried to exclude him, ended up embedded in the infrastructure of the regime that murdered 6 million Jews. That is the history Shell carries. If you found this story valuable, don't forget to like this video. It helps more people discover the history that shaped our world. Share it with someone who's interested in business, power, and how fortunes are made. And subscribe to the channel for more deep documentaries on the people, decisions, and strategies that changed history. Because the past doesn't just explain where we came from, it shows us how the world really works.